Okay, so we're diving deep today into something pretty crucial. It's
Yeah.
Vice Admiral LaCour's statement, the one about the Navy Reserve Force,
Right.
and how he actually calls it a strategic advantage for the Navy,
Hmm.
which I thought, wow, that's a pretty powerful statement, especially with all this talk about 2027 and China.
Right.
We're going to try to unpack all of that today.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got a ton of sources here,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, really interesting. But before we get into all the what putting more ready players on the field actually means, or what's going on with China and this deadline, I think we got to start with what is the Navy Reserve Force?
Yeah, for sure. It's I think it's more integrated into the Navy's overall strategy than a lot of folks might think.
Really?
It's not just like a backup force, They're actually like a planned component. They provide what LaCour calls strategic depth at scale.
Strategic depth at scale.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds impressive.
It does sound kind of catchy.
But it's kind of vague.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like?
Yeah, well,
in terms of ships and strategy.
Well, think of it this way. Imagine, the Navy has to respond to something in the South China Sea, but they also have to maintain a presence, say, in the Mediterranean at the same time, right?
Okay, right.
So strategic depth means that they can actually do both effectively.
Got it.
Because the reserve force is there, it expands the Navy's reach, it expands their capabilities.
Okay.
It's almost like, I always think of it like multiple chess games going on at once.
Oh, okay.
And you've got extra pieces.
I like that.
You can just deploy strategically.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Across all the boards.
So it's like being able to be flexible and respond to multiple complex situations all at the same time.
Exactly.
Which kind of brings us to the big thing that everyone's talking about, China. And this 2027 deadline. I mean, even without, speculating about whether or not something's going to happen.
Right.
How does that time frame impact the reserve force?
Well, it creates a sense of urgency, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Training, recruitment, how they're allocating resources.
Right.
All of that needs to be accelerated.
Okay.
So that the reserve force is actually ready to mobilize and integrate with active duty forces.
Yeah.
All on a pretty tight timeline.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big deal.
I mean, we're talking about potentially mobilizing a force globally.
Yeah.
In just 30 days.
30 days, yeah.
That's incredibly fast.
It is.
I mean, how is that even possible, logistically, operationally?
It's a challenge, that's for sure. I mean, that's a huge logistical and operational challenge.
Huge.
On a massive scale.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing. And that makes this whole idea of war-fighting readiness even more critical, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
But what does that actually mean?
Okay.
What does that look like? Because I noticed in LaCour's statement, he mentioned administrative units being part of this push for readiness.
Yeah, and it might seem a little surprising.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, when you think about how complex modern warfare actually is, every single piece has to work perfectly.
Right.
From combat units to support systems, I mean, you can have the most amazing ships and aircraft, but if your logistics are messed up or your communications or your intelligence networks aren't ready to go, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, you're basically dead in the water.
So 80% war-fighting readiness across the entire force, including those administrative units.
Yeah, it's essential to make sure everything runs smoothly.
Right.
From day one.
From day one.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds really difficult, 80%.
It's definitely tough.
Especially with, a reserve force where people have other jobs, other commitments.
Yeah.
How do you reach that?
Well, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
You need to give those reservists the training, the resources that they need.
Right.
But you also have to respect their time, their commitments. They've got families, they've got jobs outside of the service.
Right.
But the key is making the training as efficient and relevant as possible.
Okay.
So, leveraging technology, using simulations to really maximize, what they're getting out of it.
Okay.
And of course, making sure that they're incentivized, that they're being recognized for the sacrifices that they make.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
For recruitment, for retention.
So it's almost like trying to create this smooth transition between two worlds.
Yeah. It's kind of a unique challenge.
You've got the civilian world, and then, bam, you're in the military.
Right. Exactly.
And speaking of skills,
yeah,
LaCour really emphasizes specialized skills.
Right.
Being really critical within the reserve force.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, what are some of the skills that they're looking for?
Well, think about like all the technologies that are transforming the world today.
Yeah.
I mean, cybersecurity,
Right.
artificial intelligence, data analysis.
Yeah.
These are all things that the Navy needs experts in.
Okay.
I mean, they need to be able to defend their networks, analyze intelligence, make strategic decisions.
Yeah.
You know, and then you've also got these more niche areas.
Like what?
Like language expertise.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's crucial
Yeah.
for communication.
Right.
Especially, diverse operational environments.
Makes sense, yeah.
And these are skills that, maybe aren't needed every day in the active duty force, but they become so valuable in very specific situations.
So it's not just about having like more players on the field. It's about having the right players with the right skills.
Exactly.
At the right time.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And this one team concept,
Yeah.
of active duty and the reserve working seamlessly together.
Yeah.
That seems to be like a really a recurring theme.
Yeah, it is.
But how do you actually achieve that?
Well, I mean, a lot of it comes down to joint training exercises.
Okay.
Getting active duty personnel working side by side with reserve personnel in these realistic scenarios.
Right.
It helps to build that trust, It helps them to understand each other.
Okay.
And it also helps them to identify any gaps in how they work together.
Right.
And, iron out any problems in their processes.
So it's practical stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it is very practical.
Yeah.
But just as important is building that culture, of mutual respect.
Okay.
Recognizing that, each group brings something unique to the table.
Absolutely. But, the reserve force, I mean, they can't just rely on what they've done in the past.
Right, exactly.
They have to adapt.
Right.
I mean, the world's changing so quickly.
It is.
How do they make sure that their training and the way their force is structured stays relevant?
Well, they have to constantly be evaluating and adapting.
Okay.
I mean, they're looking at potential future conflicts, they're assessing emerging technologies,
Yeah.
and they're using all that information to update training programs and adapt the force structure.
Okay.
This might involve like creating whole new units,
Wow.
revising what they're teaching or investing in new equipment.
Right.
It's about being proactive,
Right.
anticipating future needs, not just reacting to the current ones.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pretty complex puzzle to put together.
Oh, it is.
All those moving pieces.
Absolutely.
And I noticed even LaCour talked about like simplifying things and easing like the administrative burdens.
Yeah.
That might seem like a small detail, but
It does.
I mean, is that actually pretty important?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, think about it. We all hate bureaucracy, right?
Yeah.
It's a pain.
Nobody likes it.
It can be a major deterrent for potential recruits.
Okay.
Especially, people with specialized skills.
Yeah.
They've got options. They could be doing other things.
Right.
So by by streamlining the administrative processes, making service as smooth and efficient as possible, the reserve force becomes a lot more appealing.
So it's about recognizing that people have lives outside of the reserve.
Yeah, they have whole other careers going on.
And respecting their time.
Exactly.
So, I mean, kind of to bring it all together here, what does it really take to reach that ready on day one status that LaCour is always talking about?
Well, it requires a lot of different things. It's not just one thing.
Yeah.
It's strategic planning.
Okay.
Making sure you're thinking ahead, anticipating those future challenges.
Right. Yeah.
It's robust training, making sure they're ready for anything. And it's also about creating a culture where you value both that individual expertise and that seamless integration between, the active duty and the reserve forces.
Okay.
And it's about recognizing that, and I'm quoting LaCour here, the global security environment demands our urgent preparations and readiness to respond to the call when needed.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. It makes me wonder if the Navy Reserve is really that critical, as a strategic advantage, facing these evolving threats. What does that tell us about warfare? How it's changing.
Yeah.
What's the role of being adaptable and having all these specialized skills that we were talking about? What's that going to look like in the future?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.